In the halls of the United Nations, where the world's most powerful voices gather, a moment unfolded that would capture the attention of millions. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, known for his measured tone and diplomatic approach, took the podium with a fire in his voice that few had ever witnessed before. The world was watching, and what followed would not only spark controversy but also ignite a global conversation about justice, accountability, and the right to speak truth to power, to foe. Ramaphosa began his address by reminding the Assembly of the founding principles of the United Nations: peace, human rights, and the dignity of all people. He spoke of South Africa's own painful history, a nation that had endured decades of apartheid, oppression, and the denial of basic freedoms. He drew a direct line from his country's past to the present suffering of the Palestinian people, making it clear that the lessons of history must not be forgotten. With conviction, he declared that the world could not turn a blind eye to the ongoing violence and injustice in Gaza and the West Bank. He called on the international community to recognize the humanity of the Palestinian people, to see their suffering not as a distant tragedy, but as a moral crisis that demands action. As he spoke, his words grew sharper, more urgent. More urgent. He condemned the bombing of civilian areas, the destruction of homes, and the loss of innocent lives. He described the images of children pulled from rubble, families separated by war, and communities living in constant fear. Ramaphosa's voice trembled with emotion as he asked, "How many more must die before the world says enough?" He challenged the Assembly to move beyond empty statements and symbolic gestures, insisting that real change requires courage and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. He reminded the world that South Africa's freedom was won not just by its own people, but by the solidarity of nations who refused to accept injustice. Turning his attention to Israel, Ramaphosa did not mince words. He called for an immediate ceasefire and an end to what he described as the occupation of Palestinian land. He urged the United Nations to hold Israel accountable for violations of international law, including the expansion of settlements and the use of disproportionate force. He acknowledged Israel's right to security, but insisted that security cannot come at the expense of another people's freedom. He called on Israel's leaders to recognize the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people and to engage in genuine dialogue for a just and lasting peace. Ramaphosa then addressed the broader international community, including powerful nations like France, the United States, and members of the European Union. He challenged them to match their words with action, to use their influence not to perpetuate the status quo, but to advance the cause of justice. He questioned how nations that claim to champion human rights could remain silent or offer only tepid responses in the face of such suffering. He called on them to support international investigations, humanitarian aid, and meaningful negotiations that respect the rights and dignity of all involved. As his speech reached its crescendo, Ramaphosa's passion was unmistakable. He spoke not just as a president, but as a father, a son, and a citizen of the world. He warned that history would judge the international community, not by its rhetoric, but by its actions. He invoked the memory of Nelson Mandela, who once said that South Africa's freedom would be incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people. Ramaphosa's voice rang out, "We must not fail this test of our humanity. We must not fail this test of our humanity. We must not betray the hopes of those who look to this assembly for justice and hope." And then, in a moment that stunned the room, Ramaphosa's microphone went silent. The words that had filled the hall with urgency and conviction were suddenly cut off. For a few seconds, there was confusion. Delegates looked around, unsure if it was a technical glitch or something more deliberate. Ramaphosa paused, his face a mixture of frustration and disbelief. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the passion that had just filled the air. The incident quickly became the subject of global speculation. Was it an accident, Or was it an attempt to silence a voice that had become too uncomfortable for some to hear? Social media erupted with debate. News outlets replayed the moment, and activists around the world demanded answers. South Africa's foreign ministry called for an explanation, insisting that their president's right to speak must be respected. Palestinian leaders praised Ramaphosa's courage, while Israeli officials dismissed his remarks as biased and inflammatory. France, which had been directly addressed in the speech, issued a statement reaffirming its commitment to a two-state solution and calling for restraint on all sides. The United Nations, for its part, cited a technical issue, but the timing left many unconvinced. The moment became a symbol of the broader struggle for free speech and justice on the international stage. For many, Ramaphosa's silencing was a metaphor for the way powerful voices are often muted when they challenge the status quo. In the days that followed, the world continued to debate the Israel-Palestine conflict. But Ramaphosa's words, and the moment he was silenced, remained etched in the memory of all who witnessed it. South Africans rallied in support of their president, while activists around the world shared clips of the speech, demanding that the United Nations ensure all voices are heard. The debate over justice, accountability, and the right to speak truth to power raged on. In the end, Ramaphosa's speech was more than just a condemnation of violence or a call for peace. It was a reminder that the struggle for justice is ongoing, that the voices of the oppressed must not be ignored, and that the world must choose between complicity and courage. The silence that followed his words spoke volumes, echoing the silence that too often greets the cries of those who suffer. But in that silence, a new conversation began, one that will continue as long as there are those willing to speak out, to stand up, and to demand a better world for all. For all.